Welcome to All the Things, a podcast for moms seeking an inspired life. Hi, I'm your host, Lisa Chin. I am a writer and a coach, and my most passionate truth is that the world needs the real you. That's why I created this podcast, to discover all the things that make us who we are. Because the better we understand ourselves, the more good we can do in the world. So, let's do that together. Thanks for joining me today. I am so excited to have my friend and accountability partner, Taima Ramsey, on the podcast. I wanted to first take a second to acknowledge that I am speaking from the unceded and traditional lands of the Wampanoag and Massachusetts tribes. And Taima and I are going to talk about some really cool, fun, lofty ideas. And I really wanted to ground this conversation and just know that we're always operating in these systems of social and cultural injustices and inequities. Now, Taima, I am so excited to have you here to share to the audience a little bit about yourself. You are an attorney by day and travel enthusiast on the weekends and in the evenings. You're a native New Yorker, born and raised in Brooklyn, and now live in Manhattan. And you started a site called Pour in a Private Plane as a way to empower women to live their best life on any budget. And her mission is to show women how they can afford to do all the things they love within their means. Hi, Taima.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So, season one. I want to first actually acknowledge that you're kind of like my midwife doula in this podcasting process. And without you, this podcast would not exist. So I first want to just acknowledge that and thank you for everything you've done for me.
You're very welcome. You did all the work. Let's remember that.
Now, season one is all about the people that I know. Can you share with the audience kind of your version of how we know each other?
Yes, absolutely. So it's been over a year now since we kind of met. We met through a marketing seminar that we both joined, and then subsequently that turned into a accountability group or a mastermind that we were in with a few other individuals. And it's one of those things, one thing led to another. And now we've been chatting almost every week for almost a year, I want to say. And it's been amazing just getting to know you and our conversations and how much we've grown in the last year. So that's my version of the story.
I love it. My version of the story is that I introduced you to human design and then you couldn't get out of your head and then we had to talk about it.
That's very accurate as well. That's definitely accurate.
Now, I'm really excited about this podcast because you are probably the only person I know who's like quote unquote an influencer. And I feel like if anyone had asked me a year ago, like, you think you'll have any like influencer friends? I'd be like, oh, no, like, I don't know. Influencer has such a weird, it's like a weird word, right, in our culture. Like, what does that word mean to you? Because I think you do identify as an influencer.
Yes. So I think that in today's culture, influencer has become almost a negative word for some reason. And I think it's just, based on stereotypes and certain ideas that people have around individuals that identify as influencers. But I think when you break down the word influencer, you have to step back and think it's somebody that has influence over a group of people, right? So I think that we are all influencers in the sense of the word because we influence the people around us, our family, our kids, our friends. But as a quote unquote influencer on Instagram, I'm doing the same thing, but on a larger scale. So I'm influencing women and a small amount of men that are interested in what I'm talking about, which is travel and money tips and money mindset. There's a whole list of things, But to me, it's just somebody that has a platform where they influence other people's decisions, other people's ideas. It's just going back to that word influence.
Did you seek out to be an influencer? Did it just kind of happen? What's the story behind that?
Oh, it was never something that I planned. I always was interested in blogging. I started out as a fashion blogger back before Instagram even existed. And I just love sharing stories and my outfits and that kind of stuff. And then I came on Instagram, and it honestly all happened by accident. I was just posting photos of my travels, and one day it stuck, and I realized that, things just started to kind of move at a very, very fast pace. And I realized that people were interested in understanding and learning about how I was traveling, how I could afford it, where I was going, tips on where I've been. And I just took it and ran with it. And that's kind of how Pouring a Private Plane was born, out of people asking me, how do you afford to go there? Or, do you have any good tips for inexpensive restaurants or hotels at this location? Or, like, how did you save for that? So it was born out of people asking me these questions. And then Instagram just kind of happened one day. And I ran with it.
It's really cool. I kind of have like a love-hate relationship with social media. I think a lot of people do. It's
I
seen
kind of
almost
do
as if,
too.
right? Like a necessary evil in today's culture. Do you think that it's possible for people to be real on social media and to create real connections? And maybe those are two different things.
um, I think it's possible, yes and yes. I think it is very difficult to do. And the reason why is because social media is filled with these aspirational lifestyles. And it is very hard for people to see past, the pretty pictures and the pretty dresses and the pretty homes and the, perfect kids and all of that. And I think it takes a lot for somebody to take a step back and realize that, um, not to sound cliche, but it is a highlight reel. Like, we're only posting the photos that we believe people want to see. We're not posting, the messy kitchens and the dirty laundry and, the, if only you guys could see me now, the crazy hair. We're not posting those real life moments that we all experience. So it's very easy for people to see the photos on Instagram as they're scrolling and feel like this person's life is, picture perfect, when in reality, they're just curating it. So I think that when we kind of take off that layer and start having conversations, we start to realize that, wow, these people are real people. They have the same issues that we have. They have the same chores and same obligations. And I think that Instagram is trying to bring that out with stories and, encouraging people to DM each other and that kind of stuff. I think they're trying to do that, or trying to encourage their users to actually be social, because it's social media, right? And I think there is where you start to develop relationships. I mean, I've met so many amazing people, including you, online. And the same goes for Instagram. I've met so many amazing women on Instagram, and it all happens in the DMs. It all happens in stories. Those are where the real conversations are happening. So I definitely think it is possible. And I think that Instagram has been promoting recently, um, encouraging both influencers and users to kind of take away the filter, if you will, and show their audience what they're behind the scenes. Really show these uncurated photos where it's like you're not wearing makeup, you don't have a fancy filter on, it's just you and your life. So I definitely see that happening more and more now.
Hmm. I'd be curious to see if those unfiltered photos, and I mean, there's like literally a hashtag for unfiltered, right? But usually the unfiltered
Mhm.
photos just don't need filtering because they're so nice, not because
Yeah.
it's like real. um, the so I mean, so the doom is in the scrolling, right? And the real connection is in the DMs. So I mean, that's I think okay. And I mean, you work a lot around mindset. And I know that it's really more focused on money, but I think that money kind of touches on a little bit of everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
The What is the mindset? Like, what do you think is a healthy mindset for someone who, like, I think about there's a huge, like, I feel like social media is like has like moms have a big target on their back with social media.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of catering or marketing to like the lack, the blame and the shame of moms. What is the mindset that someone, moms or otherwise, could have when they're going through Instagram or Facebook or whatever platform they're on to avoid that trap of like like they have everything and like really separating themselves from that person and thinking that they're lesser or not as good or whatever, like, less than that person.
Yeah.
Or,
So I mean, there's a lot of different layers that we could peel back in that area, but I think it first starts with really being self-aware and trying to identify what those triggers are and removing them. I honestly feel like if you are scrolling through your feed and it makes you feel bad, then you probably want to work on curating your feed to people that are going to empower you, that you're going to be excited to see what they're doing. And there are a lot of women on Instagram that really do a good job of showing that curated lifestyle, but at the same time, like letting you peek behind the curtain to see that, like they have the same exact issues, or I don't want to say issues, but they have the same exact things happening in their day to day that we all have. And it's finding those people that inspire you, but also are relatable. And if you are scrolling and you're just seeing these pretty pictures and they're just triggering you, then you might want to consider. I would always recommend to just either mute the person if you don't want to unfollow them, or unfollowing. It's no hard feelings. It's just more you focusing on what makes you feel good, because it's supposed to be fun. The idea of Instagram is supposed to be fun. You're supposed to be inspired, laugh, maybe learn. It's not supposed to make you feel bad. So I think it starts with finding people that make you excited, right? It's not just their pictures that excite you, but just really learning about them, hearing their personality, hearing their voice, reading their captions, listening to their stories. That's when you're really going to get to know that real person. And I think that would make a lot of people feel better about that scroll. I definitely do it if I'm coming across somebody that triggers me for whatever reason. Especially in the last year with everybody traveling and I'm sitting at home, I love to travel. There came a point where for some people I did have to mute them because it was just healthier that way, because I found myself, feeling that jealousy and that, kind of like that frustration and that bitterness. And it's okay to take a step away just for your mindset and your mental health.
that is such a good tip because when we're on a platform, we think that all this content is just happening to us, but in reality, we're the ones who have liked a page or created a connection so that their information is showing up in front of us. And so it is a matter of finding the things that inspire you and that kind of keep you grounded and to recognize if like the sensation in your body to be like, oh, that makes me feel like gross or weird or uncomfortable or bitter or frustrated, and then saying, hey, maybe I need to take a break. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
these like virtual boundaries, if you will, right? And setting those up.
Yes. Yes,
Love that.
exactly. I mean, those boundaries are very important. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge and recognize when we have those feelings. Like, there's nothing wrong with you if you feel jealousy or you feel, that bitterness when you're scrolling. It's natural for people to feel that way. It's a matter of how you act upon it. That's where we start to get ourselves into trouble, when we start reacting in a certain way. So if you feel that, it shouldn't be something that you kind of push away, or say like, oh, I'm a bad person. It's more of, why do I feel this way? What is it that is triggering me about this photo or this caption or whatever it is that this person said? that is making me feel like this, and acknowledge that, and then make a decision as to whether or not you want to continue consuming that content, or if you want, like I said, to mute it, or unfollow. And muting is a great way to kind of give yourself a break, because if you love somebody's content, but you're just having a day or a week or a month, it's okay. You can mute them. You don't have to see it. You could work on yourself and then come back to it later.
Your work on Instagram is around money, which is a loaded topic, which
Yes.
also is really interesting on social media when everything's like really aspirational and seemingly, like, I think of it as like fake a lot of the times. Maybe that's just my perspective, but it's pushes so much on the idea of lack, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that component of us, so that we like the image because we're like, oh, we want that and we're never going to have it, so at least we can like the person having it even though we don't really like the person having it. How do you bring real conversations about money online? Like, you and I have had conversations about how like social media can make you poor because you're chasing all
Mm-hmm.
these ideas of what's out there. Like, how do you keep it real on Instagram when you're talking about something that's so heated and charged as money?
I think it's important to be very transparent. And I think that that's something that we do not see a lot. And these are conversations that I've had with you and others. Um, there definitely isn't a lot of transparency on Instagram and social media. So to your point, it's like you see everybody on these vacations and owning these beautiful houses, and having these amazing clothes, designer clothes, and it's you have no idea whether they're $150,000 in debt, or whether they what their day jobs are, or maybe whether they are wealthy or not. And we won't talk about our definition of wealthy, but we don't know anything about where and how these people came to that point. And it's easy for us to make assumptions, to say like, oh well, she must be rich because she has a nice house, or she must be rich because she wears designer clothes, or she has a nice car, or whatever it is that triggers that idea. And I think that having the conversations about where those things come from, and how you got there, and what things cost, um, makes it a little bit more real and attainable. So for example, if I use the example of going on a weekend getaway, right? And maybe I'm staying at a really nice resort, and people are looking at it like, yeah, I could never afford $500 a night at blah 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 resort. And my goal is to say, yeah, this resort costs $500, but if you use this website, you could get it for $100 a night, which is a lot more affordable, maybe at least for um, more affordable for that person. So having that transparency, and it being more about like, okay, this is how much it costs, this is how we got here, this is what we did to save up for it, this is how you could do it too, I think will help to kind of I keep on saying like pull away the curtain, if you will, but it does help people to see like, oh wow, I actually could do that as well. Like I can't afford the 500, but the 100 sounds like I could do it. um Same thing with like designer clothes or bags. Like if you're one of those people that you're like, oh, I've always wanted to wear whatever dress or whatever, having those conversations about, yeah, we're not paying full price for that dress. We're finding it at a thrift store, or we're going to a consignment, or we're finding it on sale, or whatever it is. So I think that if more people were having those conversations about how they're getting there, um, that would make it a bit more um, relatable and attainable for most people. Because I feel the same way when I see somebody driving, a fancy car, or have these beautiful houses. I'm like, how the heck can they afford that? Like, what did I do wrong? But it's definitely not that. There's a lot more to it.
It's interesting because we don't expect that kind of transparency in person, right? So when you're talking about this online, do you think that it's necessary because we're not face to face with this person and seeing like kind of what's outside the frame of the picture? Or do you think that this should also happen in person as well?
So that's a great question. And this is something that I've been playing around with in real life. So I definitely feel that we live in a time where keeping up is a thing, right? We're trying to keep up with what's going on the reality shows. We're trying to keep up with what's happening on social media, and we're trying to keep up with what our friends are doing. And I see it every day living in New York City where it's like everybody wants to go out and they want to do brunch and they want to do all these things. And it's like, yeah, I want to do that too, but let's be realistic. I can't afford to do that every single day the way, you see on television, for example. And I think that there's almost a shame with, we'll just say, I'll say millennials because millennials is my target audience, but there is this shame that people have with saying, I cannot afford that, or I cannot do that, or I don't have the money for that. And while I don't encourage somebody to use those types of phrases when they're talking about their money mindset, I do encourage people to be transparent and kind of set those boundaries and say, hey, I'm not in a position to go to brunch this weekend, but what if we did something else instead? And, I started doing that with my friends that, want to go out to fancy restaurants. And yeah, we do it once in a while, but I have been trying to encourage my friends to be, to say, like, hey, I can't afford to go to that rooftop tonight, but why don't we do this? And then I'll save up so we could go next week or something along those lines. And it's been hard. I mean, people are very resistant because nobody wants to say that they don't have money. God forbid.
Mm.
But I've noticed that by setting the example, I'm starting to hear my friends feel a little bit more open to doing the same, if that makes sense. So if I say, like, I can afford to do that this week, but let's try for next month. I actually had that happen this past week where somebody said, like, hey, why don't we push this to next month so that way I could save a little bit of money so that way we could actually have a good time. And it got me so excited because I'm like, oh my God, you're recognizing that you have boundaries and you're recognizing that they're temporary. That's the other thing as well when it comes to not being able to afford something. It's like, yeah, I want to go out to that nice steak dinner, but maybe I just have to wait a week and save up for it. It doesn't mean I'm never going to have it. It doesn't mean I'm never going to be able to afford it. I just can't do it right now today. But with planning, I will be able to. So I definitely think that these conversations need to happen in real life and they need to be organic. It can't be something that you just say just because, oh, well, if I say it, then it means something. It has to be organic. It has to be a conversation that you're having with somebody and you're thinking to yourself, like, yeah, I can't do that, but, and let me just, say, like, not right now, maybe later.
So cool. You're like influencing your friends, right? That's all I could think of when you were sharing that story. The we've talked about boundaries a bit, and I'm still kind of like I feel like boundaries are such an amorphous thing. But when you talk about money and boundaries, it's really fascinating because I grew up in a low income household where boundaries were kind of set for me. And then as adults, uh, we have we have the opportunity to make money. And if we make more money than we had growing up, we no longer have those boundaries built in for us. And sometimes we don't even because we can go into credit card debt and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I had never thought about it as boundaries that and to be able to set your own parameters for your own spending in that capacity. Can you speak more about like how we can go about setting appropriate boundaries? And you kind of have this like really nice balance of indulge but save, which is your pour in a private plane kind of mindset, which I love. Can you share a little bit more about that?
So when it comes to boundaries and money, I think that there's two types. There's going to be the temporary boundaries that I mentioned, and then there's going to be more of your permanent boundaries where you know that those are probably going to be there for a very long time. And it sounds negative, like nobody wants to have boundaries when it comes to their spending and their money. But those permanent boundaries are going to go back to your spending habits. So, for example, I encourage people to focus their spending on the things that bring them joy and really do exercises where they look at their spending and they try to identify, like, all right, if getting a cup of coffee every morning makes you really happy, then that's something that you want to include in your budget, for example. If buying magazines that you're never going to read doesn't make you happy, but you feel like you have to do it, those are things that you're going to want to set boundaries around and say to yourself, like, do I really need to spend money on that? Like, is it really bringing me joy? What's going on there? And if it's not, that's got to go. And once that goes, that frees up money to put towards the things that you do truly love, which is a cup of coffee every morning, for example. So my idea is you want to set boundaries between the things that really, really, truly excite you and make you happy and you cannot live without, versus the things that are nice to have, but it's all right. It's not a big deal to me, right? Like there's a lot of things that are nice to have, and we should have them if we want them, but it's making those decisions between, like, do I go for the thing that's nice to have, or do I go for the thing that I really, really, really want and really is going to make me happy? And that's where I'm very big on setting boundaries. Like, I love coffee, but I do not need to go to a coffee house to enjoy a good cup of coffee, right? I am perfectly happy having my coffee at home. So I've created that boundary where it's like, instead of spending the money at the coffee house, I make my own coffee because it's not as important to me to be at the coffee house versus other aspects of my life. For example, I mean, I can't deny it. I love wine and I love to have my wine at home, but I especially love to go to a vineyard or whatever. So I make sure that I'm prioritizing my budget so I could afford to go out to a vineyard and enjoy a glass of wine, because that really excites me and it really makes me happy to be in that environment. That's where I set my boundaries. I have my two buckets of my nice to have and really, really want, can't live without. And I allocate my spending based off of that. And then when it comes to the temporary boundaries, we could use vacations as one of those things. Like, we all want to go on vacation. We all want to go, to the mountains or to the beach or whatever it is. And sometimes we have to create temporary boundaries in order to save up to pay for that vacation or whatever it is. For everybody, it could be something different. It could be saving up for a home. It could be saving up for a car. It could be saving up for a course you want to take. You create temporary boundaries where you say, I'm going to limit my spending here so that way I could put money towards this goal that I have. And then once you hit that goal, that temporary boundary is gone. And now you could spend on whatever it is that you were working towards. And it doesn't have to be anything big. We mentioned, maybe it could be like a night out with the girls and you just want to save a certain amount of money so that way you could have a few drinks at happy hour, or, go have, coffee with your friends, whatever it is. You set those temporary boundaries and then you save up for it. And then you get to indulge and enjoy whatever it was that you were saving up for.
So what I'm hearing is it's really just being mindful, right? And examining kind of
Yes,
the why behind your decisions. And
exactly.
I do feel like so much spending is like almost like, you talk about like the automated charges that happen like every month, like the Amazon deliveries are like, I forgot to cancel that.
Yes.
And guilty. um, and it's really taking that time and to be aware of the reason behind it, because then once we kind of get down to that, we can really evaluate that towards, in contrast to our goals and also our values, I think, is how it
hmm
sounds.
Exactly. And we are accustomed to consuming. That's all, that's something that is encouraged. And I think that sometimes we forget why we're consuming something and what it's bringing to us. So for example, like think about like all the streaming options that you have. We have Netflix, we have Disney Plus, we have I don't know, there's like so many, and we have a tendency to want to subscribe to all of them, but then we'll watch, Wheel of Fortune every day, which you don't really need a streaming service for. So, it's really being self-aware and paying attention to what it is that you truly enjoy and spend time with and, look forward to. A lot of times it's not that stack of magazines that you haven't read in the last 12 months that just keep on growing. A lot of times it's not that Hulu Plus membership that you don't even know the password to anymore because you haven't logged in since you signed up. There are so many little things in our lives that we don't realize, like in the moment it sounded like a good idea, but then, a month later, we don't realize that, yeah, that's not that important. And I encourage people to even take a day and just like jot down all the things you're spending on in that day. And it's not for you to feel bad, but it's just more for you to kind of look and see like, oh, why did I spend money on that pack of gum when I never chew gum? Or, like, why did it just makes you think a little bit, and not in a bad way. It just, I kind of laugh at myself when I do it, to be honest, because I'm like, why did I do that? It's kind of silly, but it's a good little exercise to do once in a while.
Yeah, I think it's this idea of like we're not coming from a place of shame, right? It's like just more curiosity. Like why did I
Exactly.
do that? I mean, that's kind of weird or that's kind of funny or that's kind of
Yeah.
random.
Yeah, it definitely isn't supposed to be a situation where you're penalizing yourself or you're kind of, you know, you're kind of feeling bad about it. That's never the goal when we're doing these things. It's just more like acknowledging it, kind of understanding why you made that decision and moving on from it, right? Like there's nothing bad about it. I mean, we're all learning and growing. Through all aspects of our lives. So I definitely don't think of, like when I'm tracking looking at my spending habits or, kind of kicking myself for lack of a better term for spending a little bit too much on something. I definitely don't see it as like a thing or, like, oh, I'm a bad person. I acknowledge it. I kind of think about my feelings and how why I made the decision, and then I move on from it. I mean, it's a learning experience. So it definitely is I like the word curiosity standpoint. It's very interesting just to kind of pay attention to your money and spending habits.
We're talking about like penalizing, right? And money is supercharged, right? I mean, it's kind of the carrot and even the stick. If we don't do well at our jobs, we get less of a bonus. If they say, oh, if you don't go to college you make less money, and then when you're younger you get an allowance, and if you don't do, like, I don't know, I've never got an allowance, so but but I mean but it's like money is supercharged because it's in a lot of different things. I mean, I've been working on money, I don't know for how long. It's kind of, to me, my final frontier, because it is interwoven into so many aspects of our lives. How does someone break out of that? Because there is a lot of like, I do feel like there's a lot of shame around it. And like, you were talking about that transparency in before, and like I used to, and I've been working on a little bit, and I don't know the real true reason for it, but maybe I do. But like I remember like a friend asked, like she commented on my shoes one day, like I had a pair of flats, and she's like, "Oh, I love your flats." I was like, "Oh, I got them at Old Navy," in almost like a self-deprecating way. Or sometimes I'll take so much pride in like the deals that I get, but then I'm like, why do I automatically go there? Like why is that such a automatic response for me when I could just say thank you?
Yeah. I'm guilty of the same way. I'm like, oh yeah, I got it for $1. Isn't it cute? um, and I think that there's two. I think you touched on two things there. The first is that yeah, we are proud and excited when we could share a deal that we got. Like it makes us feel like we won. It's like yes, we won. Um, but at the same time, there is that kind of self-deprecating idea behind like I don't want people to think anything different of me. Like, I don't want, like if I have something fancy or if I, have something designer, whatever it is, people are going to think and feel a certain way about me. I do acknowledge that, those feelings are legitimate. I think that we have to stop placing our value on a number in a bank account. We tend to look at our bank accounts, or we tend to look at our salaries, or we tend to look at, how much we're spending on things, and feel that that is equal to the value that we have as a human being. And that's something that we have to stop stepping away from. And it happens in two ways. It happens by looking at yourself and saying, like, and I think we talked about this before, but it's like, if I'm wearing a $2 t-shirt from Old Navy, I feel a certain way about myself, right? I look in the mirror and I feel a certain way about myself. Versus if I'm wearing a, $2,000 Oscar de la Renta dress, which I've never worn an Oscar de la Renta dress, but I could imagine I would feel completely different, right? And it's like, what is it? Is it because the dress is Oscar de la Renta and it's $2,000? Or is it because, like, what is going through our heads when we have those different emotions? Like, if Old Navy made that same exact dress and you bought it for $5, would you feel the same way? And I think that you start with that. And then you start also, and then secondly, you start to be self-aware of how you react to other people, right? So when you see that woman walking down the street in, her sweatpants from Old Navy, how do you feel about her? Like, what do you think about her versus, the woman that's walking her dog wearing like head to toe Chanel? How do you feel about her? And really start to be self-aware, and then ask yourself why. Like, my favorite thing I've been doing the last few weeks is every time I think of something, I say, why? Why do I feel a certain way about the Chanel woman? Why do I feel a certain way about the Old Navy woman? Why do I think that? Why do I think that, she has more privileges than I do? Why do I think that, and every thought that comes into your head, just ask yourself why. And it almost starts to become silly because you start to realize that you're making stuff up. And both for yourself as well as for that person. So if I'm standing in the mirror looking at myself in that dress and I'm like, why do I feel so fancy? Well, because it's Oscar de la Renta, duh. But what does that mean? It's just a label. Like, you start to really look at yourself and you're like, that's really silly. Why am I thinking that? And again, you laugh. It's not supposed to make you feel bad. It actually becomes almost comical when you start to really break it down. And the third challenge is having that conversation with a friend, right? Like, telling them, like, I was wearing this, or I was thinking this, and I just laughed to myself. And you'll start to realize that other people feel the same exact way, and you will both have that connection where it's like, oh my God, I thought the same thing about the lady walking her dog in Chanel. Like, that doesn't make sense, but why am I thinking this? It's so silly. So I definitely think that just having those kind of conversations with yourself as well as with others definitely helps a little bit.
Yeah, there's so much to say about what you just said. The examination of self, and then it transfers to our relationships, right? Like, I think that the better that we know ourselves, the better we understand other people, the more compassion we have ourselves, the more compassion we have for other people. I do love that idea of, like, just having these real conversations, because money, like I said, is like supercharged. And what does it mean for you? Because, like, why money? Like, why is it such a, like you're building a knowledge base, right? And you're sharing information. Like, why money? Like, you love travel, you love wine, you love, you have a day job that you could also talk about, and other topics that about. But, like, why did you choose money to be like the thing that inspires you, and that's the thing that you want to talk about?
I think for me, the thing that charges me about money is that we give it a power that sometimes it doesn't deserve. And I'm saying it very slowly because I don't want it to be misinterpreted. But what I mean is that money, you hear people say money buys you freedom. And I agree with that 100% because it gives you the ability to have choices. If you have a certain amount of money for whatever it is, you have a choice. You have a choice where to live. You have a choice, what clothes to buy. You have a choice of what food to cook or eat or buy or etc. So it gives you freedom, but I think that it also limits us, and sometimes it is real limits that we have. Obviously, if I only have $150,000 to spend on a house, I'm not buying that $6 million house on the hill. That's reality. But at the same time, there's also like these created limitations that we have where it's like, I use vacation as an example because I like to travel. But like if you do want to go to that, resort, but in your mind, you're like, that's way too expensive. I'm never going to be able to afford that. And it's like done, right? Like you don't even think about it. You don't even try it. You're not interested because you could never afford it. And I think that we have to take a step back and really understand like what is a real limitation versus a created limitation. Like, is it you can't afford it now, but let me come up with a plan so that way I could afford it later? Or is it one of those things where it's like it's completely unattainable at this point, and that's the reality. Like I hate thinking of those real limitations, but it's true. I mean, it's true. And I think that people give money that power, and it doesn't deserve that. And I see that a lot in my life where there's people that make double what I make and yet still are unable to afford to do the things that they enjoy for whatever reason. And in my mind, I'm like, is it real or is it created? And that's a supercharged statement in and of itself, because having these conversations and telling somebody like, yeah, you're making up that limitation, it's like, what? But I say it to myself all the time because I say to myself like, oh, I could never afford that. And then I sit down and I come up with a plan and I realize, oh, wait, I actually can. It's one of those things that I feel like when we really start to break it down and really start to treat money as a tool, it changes our relationship with it. And it makes us realize that we are able to do the things that we thought we weren't able to do, for example. And that with planning, we're able to, get whatever it is that we felt was completely out of our reach or completely out of our budget. And I think that's the thing that excites me about it, is just like showing people how like, yeah, you actually can afford that. Like, let's work towards it. Let's figure out a plan. Yeah, it's okay to go out for coffee if that makes you happy. Let's figure out how to work that into the budget. Yeah, it's okay that, you want to save up for a new sofa or whatever it is. Let's plan it. I think that there's so much you could do with it that excites me. And I also like the thrill of a deal, which I know you could appreciate. So that's the other aspect of it.
You said something quite, I want to say profound, that money is a tool.
Mhm.
I don't think that I have seen it that way and seen it. I mean, I've heard it. I've heard the idea of like money is, you can work with money. You can, money is like, it is a story, right? Everything that we're telling ourselves about money is a story. And we can certainly shift the story to money is a tool for what I want, and kind of repositioning it in our narrative as, changing the characteristics of it, and seeing it as this other entity in our story versus like the thing that we're fighting against, but like it's actually something that can work with us.
Exactly. And I think you saying fighting against it, I think that is something that, like, I think that always triggers me in the sense that people feel like money is something that you gotta kind of fight and wrangle and kind of like, it's like this conflict, right? And I think when you kind of switch the script and you start to look at it more from an aspect of like, it's not the thing that I'm trying to battle against. It's the thing that I'm using to go into battle with, right? Like it's your tool, right?
Mm.
Like it's your sword, right? So I think that when we start to see it in that respect, it starts to open up the doors and windows for us. And we start to realize like, wait a second, it's not about, like me trying to like wrangle that bank account. It's more about, all right, looking at it and saying, all right, I'm going to make you work for me. Let's do this. I'm going to use you as a tool. Let's do this. And kind of going at it from that aspect.
I love that visualization, like to have it turn from this like monster and this thing that, and you said before like we're so accustomed to spending and to consuming specifically. I think that that word is very important to use versus spending because we consume in so many ways. And money is seen like hand in hand with consuming. And so when we are talking about the idea of like cutting back and doing less or spend like or like having less, it kind of triggers you because you're and then you associate it with money. So I think it's really interesting to kind of disassociate that and to like bring money back onto your side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when it comes to spending, I've said this a couple of times to a few individuals, and they kind of look at me with that look in their eyes. So when it comes to spending, something that I like to say is, when you buy something, are you buying it because it brings you joy, or are you buying it because it brings you joy when people compliment you on it? And that's something that we have to think about when we're observing our spending habits and our relationship with money. I'm definitely guilty of having bought something because I'm excited, when somebody tells me like, "Ooh, I love your shoes," or "I love this," or "I love that." And I've started to spend more on things that, like, when I look in the mirror, I'm like, "Ooh," like I just get that feeling, like I get excited about it. And I know I'm doing it by the look that I get on my husband's face when I walk in with my crazy pairs of shoes that bring me so much joy. And he's like, "Those are the ugliest things I've ever seen in my life." But those are conversations that we have to have with ourselves, is to really think about, like, why are we consuming? Why are we spending? Are we doing it because of an emotion that we get out of that object? Or is the emotion that we get out of people's perception of us now that we own whatever it is that we spent that money on?
Mm. And it really I think that these conversations about money are really important to have because women control most of the spending in this country. I mean, the mothers for households, but women are just, I think, maybe we are conditioned that way to consume, right? And
Mm-hmm.
therefore we actually our spending makes up so much of the spending of this of at least in the US. I don't know about other countries and how it breaks down by at least by women or men. Um, but I think that's a really important conversation to have because we are also, I think, conditioned for a lack mentality, for that need to have things so that we can be a certain way. And that is just such important work that you're doing to like break down these ideas. So I kind of want to point that out too because I forgot about that until right now. You were talking about like specifically about shoes and things like that, and it's like I think about, like how many shoes do I have versus how many does my husband have? And why do I need shoes in all these different colors when he can just wear black shoes? Like, why can Steve Jobs just wear black and Calvin Klein, right? And like Michael Kors or whoever it is, just wear black all the time and be okay. And let's say, I don't know of a female identifying designer that has done the same thing or even a tech person or
Mm-hmm.
anyone. It'd be like
Mm-hmm.
avant-garde. Like they'd be like ostracized from like
Mm-hmm.
I think of even women in the government, like in the Senate, and they have to wear like colorful suits because they have to be seen as like less threatening. And so like now they have to buy a ton of suits because
Mm-hmm.
they have to fit a certain way in the society.
Yeah. And God forbid if you're in the public eye and you wear an outfit more than once.
Right.
Like, who made up that
Okay.
rule?
Seriously. And then you get called out, like, right, by like the paparazzi, like, who
Yes.
wore it better? Or like, oh, they wore it
Yeah.
again. And like, well, you've never worn an outfit again. Like, you've probably worn your shirt twice in a row, like, without washing it. It's so
What do
true.
you
And it's like,
mean? I've been wearing this for 3 days.
oh, that could be like a whole nother episode in itself because now I'm all fired up about it because that's the stuff that really gets to me. Is like, you know, I started this podcast with like the land acknowledgement and the idea that, and then the fact that the native tribes in where I live around Boston, like w- they had their land stolen from them, and now we're living in these systems. And the thing is, like, these systems exist in all levels. And
Mhm.
when I'm talking about and when we're talking about money, it's like money is a man-made thing. It's a
Yes.
system, and it works in a capitalistic, consumeristic system. And so it's like really important for us to call out that it's like, yeah, we're talking about money, and it's like it's really great to like have the things we want, but it's like also we're in this, and it's part of the way that things run. And like I don't know if like we need to break it all down or anything and conquer it or whatever. It's just like, but we need to recognize that. We need to recognize that like the reason that we may feel a certain way is not because like of childhood traumas or because we were taught to do a certain thing, but it's also because like society is telling us like you need shoes in
Hmm.
every color. And so it's like,
Yeah.
how do we separate out the the whys? Like the why of you love your shoes. Like, why do you love your shoes? Because I just love them. That's great.
Hmm.
If you were like, oh, it's because I saw a bunch of, people in People magazine wearing these shoes and like I need to have them now. It's like, well, okay, but why? And like let's just
Exactly.
make sure.
Yes. Yes. I mean, if you keep on, like I said, if you keep on asking those whys, it almost starts to, first of all, you almost start to lose interest in whatever it is. You're like, yeah, those white cowboy boots are not my jam anymore, but they did look cute on her. So um, that's a real life story. Yeah. So yeah, I think that it's very hard because we're creatures of our environment, and it's very hard when you see these things happening around you to step out of the line, if you will. But I think we have to be brave enough to step outside of that line and kind of really look into within ourselves and really be brave and kind of say like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that, and be confident that nothing bad is going to happen, right? Like, all right, so you wear the same, black slacks to work every day. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Like you have two pairs of shoes. That's completely fine. We are all different. And I think that we have to acknowledge that, and this is something that I talk about a lot, but we have to acknowledge that what brings me joy is not necessarily going to be what brings Lisa joy and what brings, anybody else joy. And we have to decide what that is. For me, it's shoes. I love shoes. I have a lot of shoes, but that's not the same for my friends. They're like, I have 5 pairs of shoes and that's enough. And we don't judge each other for it, like they have 5 pairs of shoes, but maybe they have an amazing collection of earrings or, scarves or whatever it is that makes them happy. And we celebrate each other for that as opposed to feeling bad about, like you have this and I don't. We have to just step away from that. We have to step out of the line, and it takes a lot of bravery. It takes a lot of confidence, and it definitely is not always easy, but nothing bad is going to happen. Nothing bad is going to happen if you choose to step out of that line. You will be just okay.
Hmm. I think that's just it's such a good thing to remember because it's that fight or flight, like that reaction that we have that's automatic, and it's like how do we kind of go
Mhm.
beyond that and just be like, okay, I'm safe, I'm okay. I don't need to
Yes.
buy these shoes to be safe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we've
Yeah.
just, I don't know. I think we create things like in our mind. It's like, I have to have this because if I don't show up in this outfit or whatever, somebody's going to say something. And chances are nobody is going to say anything. I mean, there might be like that 1% of people that'll be like, oh, look, Lisa's wearing the same outfit again. She had that on Monday. Who
Mhm.
cares?
Mhm.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Not your people, right?
Exactly. Like, I don't care.
Mm.
I'm not paying attention that much, to be honest with you. I couldn't tell you if you wore the same outfit every day this week.
So true. So true.
Yeah, yeah.
I I mean, I literally could talk to you for the whole day. And I can't wait till we meet in person so that we could just like have wine or coffee or whatever it is and just chat in person. Now, I wanted to kind of you've shared so much information, which I just love. But I wanted to kind of ask you one last question, kind of wrap up the episode. Like, this is first season of this podcast. Like, the idea of truths is like really important to me. And like, what is one thing to be true? Like that like deep in your bones?
I think for me, and it's taken me a long time to come to this realization, but I think for me is that I have 100% control. And that's in all aspects of my life. I have 100% control. Even when it feels like I don't, I do. Um, and that's something that I stand by. That's something that I have been standing by for the last several years. It's something that I am very confident about. And it's something that I will like I will argue to the death if somebody tries to tell me something different. I have control. I have control. I have control of all aspects of my life, even when it feels like I don't. I have control of my reactions. I have control of how I choose to handle situations. I have control over so many different things. And that's something that's my truth. And that's something that I hold on to tight.
I love that. My eyes went like bug-eyed when you said that because I'm like, yes!
That's my truth. That's my truth.
Love it. I love it. Thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a great conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to ask you all the questions that I kind of wish we could spend all our time talking about as well, aside from just like accountability partners, but like just getting getting deeper. So I love it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And thanks to you for listening. If you are interested in more episodes, take a look at the rest of the season, hit subscribe, share with a friend. If you want to start having real conversations about money with them, check out Taima on her blog, poorinaprivateplane.com. And she's also at the Instagram handle with that name. And reach out with her, DM her, have a real conversation with her as well. She is a real person behind all those really fantastic pictures, by the way. And I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in today. A great big thank you to Medfield TV for their support and editing this episode. Living an inspired life is a worthy endeavor. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Be sure to subscribe in your preferred podcast player for future real conversations. And if any part of this episode made you think of a friend, let them know that they aren't alone in their journey and share all the things with them. If you'd like to stay in touch, hop on over to lisaforreal.com and sign up for my daily blogs. Or find me on Instagram at Reclaiming Motherhood. See you next time.